Marvel DC, The Underground Doctor Chapter 81. Meeting again. The landing gear of the Gulfstream G650 made violent physical friction with the runway, and a high-frequency vibration came from the fuselage. The speed brakes rose, and the roar of the engine's reverse thrust filled the entire cabin. Jessica pressed her face against the bulletproof porthole, staring at the dazzling California sun outside, still clutching half a glass of unfinished champagne in her hand. Tracy was using a makeup mirror to touch up her lipstick, holding extremely high expectations for the upcoming trip to Hollywood. The two had not been idle since they got on the plane, tasting every high-end snack at the bar. William sat on a single sofa, methodically inserting several high-carbon titanium alloy scalpels back into the tactical straps on the outside of his thighs, covering them with the hem of his windbreaker. The three mercenary teams Tony mentioned in the video were classified by him as high-risk medical waste. Handling waste required a pre-made classification plan. The cabin door opened. A heat wave mixed with the smell of aviation kerosene and the Pacific sea breeze flooded into the cabin. Below the gangway, the private apron at Los Angeles International Airport was surrounded by several black full-size SUVs in a semicircle. In the most prominent position parked a silver-gray Audi R8 sports car. Tony Stark leaned against the car door, wearing a bright red Hawaii floral shirt and loose beach shorts on his lower half, with his signature amber sunglasses perched on the bridge of his nose. The blue light from the miniature arc reactor on his chest shone through the thin fabric. Standing to his left was Pepper Potts, dressed in a slim-fitting professional suit. She held a stack of folders, stepped on stiletto heels and kept her back straight. To the right was Dr. Ho Yinsen, who had changed into a clean casual suit. His complexion looked much better than it did in the cave in Afghanistan. On the periphery stood a plump man, Happy Hogan, wearing an intercom headset and scanning the surroundings alertly. William walked down the gangway carrying a backpack. Jessica and Tracy followed behind. "Dr. William?" Tony opened his arms and walked over with extremely exaggerated steps, giving him a solid bear hug. William did not reciprocate, letting him hug for 2 seconds before reaching out to press against Tony's shoulder and pushing him away. "Sand from Afghanistan hasn't been washed off yet, Mr. Stark." William patted the collar of his windbreaker. "It seems the UV rays in California are helping your skin recover, but your heart rate is 15% higher than normal. Complications from palladium poisoning are starting to manifest." Tony didn't mind having his health status exposed and shrugged nonchalantly. "With you here, do I still need to worry about that? You're the private consultant I spent $200 million to hire back." He turned his head to look at Jessica behind William, his gaze lingering for 2 seconds on Jessica's slender arms. "Is this the lady who threw my ace bodyguard onto the hood? Quite a vigorous way to make an entrance." Jessica pushed up her aviators and chewed gum. "He was in my way. Next time use someone lighter. I'm afraid of smashing your luxury car." Happy hearing this nearby, his eyelids twitched wildly, and he silently placed his hand on the edge of the holster inside his suit. "This woman looks like she's less than 120 pounds. Can she really throw a man over 200 pounds? Relax, Happy. This is a distinguished guest." Tony snapped his fingers, then stepped aside to introduce Pepper behind him. "Me formally introduce you, Pepper Potts, CEO assistant of Stark Industries and the fire extinguisher I can't live without. Pepper, this is Dr. William, the man who pulled me back from the brink of death in the desert." Pepper stepped forward and handed over a business card. Her fingers were long and her nails were neatly trimmed. "Dr. William, thank you for everything you've done." Pepper's tone was perfectly measured, showing gratitude to the savior while maintaining the professional demeanor of a high-level corporate executive. "During the time Tony was missing, the whole company was in chaos. You not only saved him but also saved Stark Industries. If you have any needs in Los Angeles, you can call the number on the card directly. I will be on standby for you 24 hours a day." William took the card and glanced at the title on it. "Miss Potts, your boss is a troublemaker. To be his assistant, you need to keep fast-acting heart relief pills on hand." Pepper gave a rare smile of agreement. "Already gone through several bottles. Also, I've prepared unlimited credit shopping cards for your 2 female companions. I hope they have a good time at Beverly Hills." Ho Yinsen stepped forward and extended his right hand. "Dr. William, we meet again." William shook his hand. The touch was stronger than before. "Dr. Ho Yinsen, it seems you've adapted to the rhythm of modern society. The heart murmur is gone and you're recovering well, thanks to Tony's arrangements." Ho Yinsen pointed to the convoy nearby. "I've said goodbye to the past. He even gave me the title of senior researcher at Stark Industries. Without you, none of this would have happened." "All right, the reunion segment ends here. The beach party is ready." Tony clapped his hands. "Dr. William, you ride in my car. Let the 2 ladies take the SUV behind. Happy, you're responsible for being their guide and taking them to see the Hollywood Walk of Fame." Happy took the order and walked up to Jessica and Tracy, forcing a stiff smile. Jessica unceremoniously threw the huge woven bag to Happy. Its heavy weight made Happy stagger instantly, his lumbar spine making a dangerous sound. William pulled open the passenger door of the Audi R8 and sat inside. Tony got into the driver's seat and pressed the start button. The V10 engine let out a low growl. The sports car was the first to drive out of the apron and onto the Pacific Coast Highway. The windows rolled down and the sea breeze flooded into the car. Pepper has already seen the equipment list. Tony held the steering wheel with one hand while sliding the other across the car screen. By tomorrow afternoon at the latest, the top-tier surgical instruments and targeted drugs you want, even including a decommissioned military hyperbaric oxygen chamber, will be delivered intact to your little clinic in New York. Efficiency. William looked at the palm trees receding outside the window. But you have to do me a small favor. Tony changed the subject, his tone losing its previous casualness. Those 3 mercenary teams have very shady origins. I checked their fund flow. The accounts went through the Cayman Islands a dozen times before finally pointing to an overseas shell company of Obadiah's. The old fox is getting desperate. Hired killers to murder you. Can't you just call the police? The FBI would be very interested in such a big case. William's tone was flat. There's no solid evidence. Those funding chains can be cut at any time and he can find a scapegoat to take the fall. Tony stepped on the gas, overtaking a slow-moving RV. Besides, I don't plan on going through legal procedures. Stark Industries has enough scandals already. Closing the weapons division has sent the stock price to rock bottom. If a scandal like a founding member hiring killers to murder the CEO breaks out, I'm afraid those blood-sucking news media outlets will swarm in like vultures. I hate trouble. Tony turned his head and glanced at William. I want you to help me deal with these 3 teams. Cleanly, efficiently, and without leaving a trace. In exchange, I won't just provide medical equipment. You can have a 10% stake in Stark Industries' future biomedical laboratory. A 10% stake, this was a number enough to drive Wall Street crazy. William pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses. He hadn't planned on staying idle in Lowe's Angels anyway. Since Obadiah had reached out his hand, he didn't mind performing a quick amputation. Fine. William leaned back in the leather seat. Then it's a deal? After tonight's party, all the information will be sent to your room. Tony smiled and floored the accelerator. Half an hour later, the Audi R8 drove into the Cliff Villa on the Malibu coast. It was a highly modern, all-glass curtain wall building, half built on the cliff and half cantilevered out with the turbulent Pacific Ocean below. The car parked in the garage. William pushed the door open and got out. As soon as his feet touched the ground, his eyes habitually scanned the surrounding architectural structure. There are 2 blind spots in the installation angle of the infrared detectors. The load-bearing pillars below the cliff haven't been blast-proofed, although the glass curtain wall is made of bulletproof material. It can't withstand continuous fire from armor-piercing incendiary rounds. William stood at the garage entrance, rattling off a series of data. If I were those mercenaries, I would choose to infiltrate from the sea, plant C4 explosives under the cliff, or just come in an attack helicopter to blow it up, sending this villa along with you into the Pacific to feed the sharks. Tony's hand pulling out the car key stopped midair. He looked at William and sighed somewhat helplessly. Here for a vacation, not a security assessment. Jarvis, turned the power of the radar net below the cliff to the maximum. Yes, sir. Behind them, several SUVs drove into the garage one after another. Jessica and Tracy jumped out of the cars, looking at the luxurious mansion in front of them and letting out exclamations like they'd never seen the world. My God, this place is even more exaggerated than in the movies. Jessica ran to the edge of the cliff, glanced down and felt a wave of dizziness. Boss, are you sure we're staying here? I feel like I can't even afford to compensate for a single floor tile here. Fun, if anything breaks, it's on Tony. William walked toward the villa's main entrance. Pepper came up from behind and arranged for servants to carry the luggage. Doctor, William, your room is on the east side of the 2nd floor with the best ocean view. Dinner will start promptly at 7. Tony has invited the best Michelin-starred chef in Lowe's Angels. Thank you, William replied, walking into the villa. The air conditioning dispelled the California heat. William went to the guest room on the 2nd floor and threw his backpack on the bed. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the blue sea outside. The waves crashed against the rocks, splashing white foam. The sun was good. It was a perfect day for a vacation. The ring at the base of his left index finger heated up slightly. William knew that the peace was only temporary. Since Obadiah's mercenaries had already arrived in Lowe's Angels, they wouldn't wait long. He took off his windbreaker and unbuttoned his shirt cuffs. In the next few days, he would need to complete several bloodless surgeries on this beach. But before that, he had to taste the Michelin chef's skills. After all, the joy of freeloading off the world's richest man was something he really couldn't pass up. Chapter 82. Press conference in Metropolis. Turned the steering wheel all the way to the left. What kind of drift do you call that? Tony Stark lay sprawled out on a beach chair wearing tinted sunglasses and shouted at the top of his lungs at the jet ski speeding across the water. Shut up, you rich snob. When I was driving a garbage truck in New York, you were still playing with mud. Jessica's voice soared over 100 meters of crashing waves with incredible piercing power. Accompanied by the terrifying roar of the engine, the $70,000 limited edition jet ski pulled off an anti-physical sharp-angle drift across the water. The wall of water it kicked up nearly knocking Tracy, who was surfing nearby, into the water. Tony's mouth twitched violently and he turned to look at William, who was quietly drinking an iced cola next to him. Doctor, William, are you sure your little assistant is a normal human? Tony pointed at the sea. The steering rudder of that jet ski is made of steel alloy and she just bent it with one hand. She just has a bit more strength than the average person. William pushed up the gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose, his tone as flat as if he were discussing the weather. Don't make such a fuss, Mr. Stark. Is the contract for the equity stake you promised ready? Pepper is already drafting it. Tony picked up a glass of green chlorophyll juice, took a sip and frowned slightly. But before that, you have to ensure we survive tonight. Jarvis just reported that those 3 mercenary squads have broken up into smaller groups and infiltrated the Malibu area. How many in total? William put down the coconut in his hand and picked up a slice of pre-cut iced watermelon. 36, fully armed, led by some ruthless characters retired from the Middle East. Tony lowered his voice and traced a line in the air. Do you need me to activate the villa's highest-level defense system? No need. William took a bite of the watermelon, the juice sweet. Isn't there a dinner party with a Michelin chef at 7 tonight? Before 6:30 I will have cleaned up these 36 pieces of medical waste. Don't worry, not a single drop of blood will dirty your private beach. Tony looked at William's expressionless face, and a chill inexplicably ran down his spine. 36 top mercenaries who killed without blinking in the mouth of this Asian doctor were like 36 bags of sorted trash that needed to be thrown away. Fine, I believe you. Tony raised his glass and tapped it against William's watermelon rind. To great modern medicine, to the 10% equity stake. William swallowed the watermelon and leaned back in the chair to rest with his eyes closed. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Anywhere door in the DC universe in Metropolis, United States, in the press conference hall on the top floor of Lex Tower, flashbulbs flickered like daylight and the sound of shutters blended into one continuous noise. Mr. Lex. What is the ultimate goal of LexCorp's $10 billion investment in the field of neuroscience this time? Mr. Lex, there are rumors on Wall Street that you are secretly developing a type of mind-control drug. Is this true? The reporters below were like sharks that had smelled blood, frantically shoving microphones bearing the logos of major media outlets forward, while security personnel desperately tried to maintain the human barricade. Lex Luthor wore a well-tailored Armani couture suit, no tie, collar slightly open, exuding an air of composed authority. His signature bald head shone with a cold, hard luster under the spotlight. Mind control? That's the kind of stupid thing only villains in third-rate sci-fi movies would do. A graceful arc curled at the corners of Lex's mouth, and his voice transmitted steadily through the microphone to the entire room. LexCorp has only one goal: to let humanity completely free itself from suffering. He turned around, extended his right hand toward the backstage, and his voice rose sharply. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome with applause the youngest Nobel laureate in physiology or medicine in history, a triple PhD in neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy from Columbia University. The savior of psychological patients, Dr. Elias Thorne. Amidst thunderous applause, a handsome and refined man walked onto the stage. Elias Thorne was only 31 years old this year, wearing a soft, light gray casual suit, gold-rimmed glasses, and exuding a gentle, jade-like temperament. His eyes were full of compassion and sincerity, making anyone who looked at him unable to help but feel extreme trust. Thank you everyone. Elias walked to the microphone and bowed slightly. Dr. Thorne, a female reporter from the Daily Planet, stood up abruptly. Can the dopamine and serotonin-targeted atomized agent developed by your team really completely cure depression and mania? Not just cure. Elias' voice was gentle and magnetic. Our research on neural mechanisms has achieved breakthrough progress. This atomized agent can precisely regulate the emotional center of the brain. It can not only eliminate pathological pain but also allow humanity, for the first time in history, to autonomously and safely control their own emotions. Elias scanned the room, his eyes filled with a fanatical, idealistic glow. Imagine a world without sadness, without anxiety, without depression. This is the original intention of my collaboration with LexCorp. Deafening applause erupted from the audience again, and many reporters who had once suffered from spiritual illness even had reddened eyes. Luthor stood to the side, applauding along, but deep within his profound eyes a trace of cold mockery flashed. Eliminate suffering? No, it's to eliminate resistance. Luthor sneered in his heart. As long as this atomized agent is put into mass production, the entire population of Metropolis, and even the entire United States, will unknowingly develop an absolute physiological dependence on this happiness. By then, Lex Luthor would be the true master of this city, and no one would be able to stop him. The press conference concluded successfully. At the contract signing ceremony, Luthor and Elias shook hands tightly in front of the cameras. Dr. Thorne, LexCorp's top biological laboratory is ready for you, Luthor said with a face full of sincerity. When do you plan to officially begin the mass production research of the new drug? The reporters below perked up their ears, ready to record this historic moment. Elias pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses and smiled apologetically. Sorry, Mr. Lex and fellow media friends, I might need to take a few days off. Luthor raised an eyebrow, appropriately showing a hint of confusion. Does the doctor have other arrangements? Yes. Elias nodded. Tomorrow I am going back to my hometown Gotham City. Upon hearing the words Gotham City, the reporters present couldn't help but gasp. That city of sin, ruled by gangs, drugs, and lunatics, was simply the difference between heaven and hell compared to the flawless Nobel laureate before them. Gotham University has invited me to hold an academic exchange seminar on psychology, Elias explained patiently. It is my alma mater and the place where my academic enlightenment began. I want to bring this joy back to my hometown first. After the seminar, I will immediately return to Metropolis to get to work. I see the doctor is truly a sentimental person. Luthor smiled and patted Elias on the shoulder, then turned his head to gesture to the captain of the bodyguards behind him. Public security in Gotham has never been very good. For your safety, I will send LexCorp's most elite security squad to escort you to Gotham for the entire journey. Mr. Lex, you are too kind. Elias did not refuse. Then I will trouble you. Chapter 83. Phantom Invisible. Half an hour later, top floor of Rex Tower CEO office. In front of the huge floor-to-ceiling window, Luthor held a glass of whiskey overlooking the bustling night view of Metropolis. Boss. The captain of the bodyguards pushed the door open and entered, bowing his head respectfully. The security team escorting Dr. Thorne to Gotham has been arranged. Every member is equipped with heavy firepower, and armored vehicles are also ready. Luthor swirled his glass, the ice cubes clinking crisply. Keep a close eye on him when he gets to Gotham. He is a genius, but geniuses often have unrealistic fantasies. I don't want him to have any accidents in a cesspit like Gotham that would affect the progress of my serum. Understood. The captain hesitated for a moment, then lowered his voice to report. However, boss, Gotham hasn't been peaceful lately. I heard a vigilante wearing a black cape has appeared in the East End, breaking people's bones everywhere. Also, the human trafficking business of the Falcone family was wiped out by someone last night, and the East End is in total chaos now. Just gang warfare, a bunch of rats that can't make it to the big stage. Luthor snorted contemptuously and downed the whiskey in his glass. If Falcone dares to touch my people, I don't mind using the financial power of Rex Group to completely buy out his mafia empire and then tear it to pieces. Meanwhile, the sunset in Malibu was sliced to pieces by vast clouds of fire. On the terrace of the villa, a 3-star Michelin chef was placing a piece of M9 Wagyu beef on the grill, the fat dripping onto the charcoal and sparking a rich, charred aroma. Jessica changed into an extremely eye-catching printed bikini and was holding a Long Island iced tea, competing with Tracy and holding her breath in the infinity pool. Tony Stark, wearing a floral shirt, held a glass of bourbon in one hand and walked to the lounge chair beside William. The data has been sent to your phone. Tony lowered his voice and slipped an encrypted USB drive into the pocket of William's trench coat. 3 coordinates. They brought heavy firepower and even managed to get their hands on a few military-grade microdrones. William picked up his glass and took a sip of soda water, his gaze lingering on the reactor on Tony's chest for half a second before he stood up. I'm going to change clothes, see you at dinner. William dropped this sentence and turned toward the second floor of the villa. Tony raised his glass in response. Pushing open the guest room door, he locked it. William pulled the blackout curtains and inserted the USB drive into his portable micro-terminal. The screen lit up, showing 3 sets of red dots distributed on the map of Los Angeles. The first group, an abandoned cold storage warehouse on the edge of Santa Monica Beach. The second group, a motel on the edge of downtown Los Angeles. The third group, a medium-sized yacht anchored on the edge of the high seas of Malibu. There were 2 hours left until dinner. Plenty of time. William took off his white coat and shirt and changed into a set of dark gray tactical gear without any reflective material. His left hand brushed over the straps on his outer thigh, where 6 high-carbon titanium alloy scalpels were neatly arranged. The storage ring shimmered, and that silver optical camouflage medical blanket appeared in his palm. He shook out the blanket and draped it over his shoulders. He pressed the activation button on the collar. The figure in the mirror disappeared completely after a subtle distortion of light. Even his breathing and body temperature were perfectly shielded by this product of alien technology. William pushed open the floor-to-ceiling window, leaped off the second-floor balcony, and silently merged into the gradually deepening night of California, the abandoned cold storage warehouse on Santa Monica Beach. The sea breeze was mixed with the stench of dead fish. The tin door was ajar, and dim searchlight beams shone from inside. 6 fully armed mercenaries were scattered in various corners. Tactical vests, night vision goggles, M4A1 carbines with silencers. This was a typical militarized combat squad. The captain was sitting at a dilapidated wooden table, assembling an M24 sniper rifle. The only sound in the air was the light clicking of metal parts interlocking. William walked into the cold storage, stepping over oil stains. The optical camouflage blended him with the surrounding clutter. He stopped behind a sentinel who was smoking without any superfluous movements. His right hand reached out from the coverage of the camouflage blanket, and 2 fingers precisely pinched the sentinel's carotid sinus. Local heavy pressure caused blood pressure to plummet, and the brain instantly powered down. The sentinel didn't even make a sound as he slumped softly to the ground. William supported the back of his head with his left hand and laid him flat on the ground without making a single noise. The second one, the third one. William moved through the cold storage, his footsteps lighter than a cat's. He didn't use his scalpels. For these fixed targets, physical stunning followed by cervical dislocation was the cleanest medical treatment. When the captain finished assembling the sniper rifle and chambered a round, he found that the cold storage was excessively quiet. Vulture report situation. The captain pressed his headset, only dead silence. The captain drew the Glock pistol from his thigh, turning rapidly. A cold scalpel was already pressed against his carotid artery. In medical terms, after cutting the carotid artery, the brain can remain conscious for about 5 to 8 seconds. A flat voice sounded in the air with no discernible source. The captain's pupils constricted and he instinctively wanted to pull the trigger. The blade slashed horizontally. The ultrathin titanium alloy cut through skin, muscle, and blood vessels with almost negligible resistance. A high-pressure column of blood sprayed out but was blocked by an invisible barrier, sliding down along the air. The captain clutched his neck and fell to the ground, his throat making a wheezing sound. William took out an alcohol wipe, carefully wiped the blade, and turned to leave. There were 6 more corpses in the cold storage, all with the same cause of death. 20 minutes later, the motel on the edge of downtown, the room at the very end of the second floor. A "Do Not Disturb" sign hung on the door. William stood outside the door. A faint light shone from under the door gap and a very thin tactical tripwire was attached to the doorknob. He didn't break down the door but climbed onto the roof along the water pipe on the outer wall and found the ventilation duct. He removed the louvered grill and slid into the bathroom along the narrow duct. There were 5 people in the room, 4 playing cards, and 1 on duty in front of the surveillance screen. William didn't deactivate the camouflage. He took 2 tubes of high-concentration medical potassium chloride solution from the storage ring and attached extremely fine injection needles. He walked out of the bathroom. The person on duty in front of the monitor was yawning while staring at the screen. A needle as thin as a cow's hair protruded from the void, precisely piercing the vein on the side of his neck. His thumb pushed the plunger. High-concentration potassium ions surged into the blood circulation, directly destroying the electrophysiological balance of the myocardial cells. Within 3 seconds, cardiac arrest occurred. The person on duty tilted his head and smashed onto the keyboard. The 4 people playing cards heard the noise and turned their heads one after another. "Mark. What's wrong with you?" A burly man walked over and reached out to push his companion's shoulder. Greeting him were 3 scalpels flying in a pin shape. Poof, 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 the blades pierced the center of their foreheads respectively. The last person reacted extremely quickly, kicking over the table as cover and blindly sweeping with the submachine gun in his hand. Bullets shattered the TV and glass windows. William had already circled to his side, shielded by the optical camouflage. His right hand became a blade, his wrist turned, and his palm blade chopped heavily onto the 3rd cervical vertebra of the opponent. The sound of bone cracking was crisp and pleasant. The gunfire stopped abruptly. The room was filled with the smell of gunpowder and blood. William glanced at the corpses on the ground, retrieved the scalpels, and returned to the roof the same way he came. Progress is halfway through, taking less than 40 minutes, and there is one last place left, Marvel, DC. The Underground Doctor C8 Chapter 84. The timing is just right on the edge of the high seas off Malibu. The night was thick. Medium-sized yacht, flying no flags, was anchored in deep water. No lights were on the deck. Only a few flickering red glows from cigarettes could be nautical miles from the coastline. William stood on a protruding black reef, the sea breeze blowing his dark gray tactical suit tight against his skin. On his micro-terminal screen, 25 red dots were crowded into the yacht's structural diagram. This was Obadiah's final bargaining chip. Putting away the terminal, William activated his optical camouflage. His figure completely merged with the surrounding darkness. He didn't look for a boat. Instead, he leaped directly into the Pacific Ocean. The icy seawater enveloped him. The special force field of the optical camouflage not only shielded light and heat radiation but also drastically reduced water resistance. William swam rapidly toward the yacht along the seabed like an incorporeal ghost fish. 10 minutes later, he climbed the boarding ladder at the yacht's stern. Water droplets slid off his tactical suit and dripped onto the teak deck without making a sound. 2 fully armed mercenaries were leaning against the railing, smoking. One held an HK-416 assault rifle equipped with night vision while the other was looking down at a tactical tablet. William stepped forward, both hands shot out simultaneously, accurately gripping their thyroid cartilages, his thumbs and index fingers applying inward pressure. The faint sound of cracking was masked by the waves. Their tracheas collapsed instantly, stripping them of any possibility of calling for help. The 2 men clutched their necks, eyes bulging as their bodies slid limply toward the deck. William caught their backs and laid the corpses flat in the shadows, physical-mechanical asphyxiation. It took less than 7 seconds. Stepping over the bodies, William pushed open the bulkhead door leading to the lower deck. The lower deck, originally a luxurious entertainment room, had been converted into a temporary armory. Boxes of C4 explosives, armor-piercing rounds, and several man-portable air defense missiles were stacked beside leather sofas. 23 mercenaries were making final tactical preparations. Click. The metallic sounds of rounds being chambered rose and fell. The leader was a burly white man with a full beard, who was mapping out infiltration routes on a map of the Malibu coast pinned to the wall. Stark's villa defense system will undergo a routine reset in 10 minutes. That is our only window. Team 1 is responsible for cutting the backup power, and Team 2 will use thermite to burn through the bulletproof glass. Remember, the employer requires no survivors. William stood at the corner of the stairs, looking down at the group. With a flick of his hands, 2 micro-Uzi submachine guns equipped with silencers appeared in his grip. In surgery, the most forbidden thing when removing a large lesion is hesitation. The same logic applied to physical transcendence. He raised the muzzles, puff, 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 puff. The muffled gunshots merged into a single line. Shell casings danced joyfully on the wooden floor. William didn't spray wildly. Every bullet was based on precise ballistic calculations, heading straight for the target's medulla oblongata, hearts, or carotid arteries. The 5 mercenaries closest to the stairs didn't even scream before their heads exploded into a mist of blood, and they collapsed heavily. Enemy attack, take cover. The bearded man reacted extremely fast, kicking over a solid wood table in front of him and shrinking behind it. The remaining mercenaries quickly scattered to find cover. Well trained, they immediately donned night vision and thermal imagers, raising their guns to fire frantically at the stairwell. Tongues of fire spat out as bullets tore through expensive paintings and wood paneling, wood chips flying everywhere, but there was nothing in their field of vision, no heat source, no infrared outline, only an empty staircase. Cease fire, cease fire, the bearded man roared. The gunfire stopped abruptly, leaving the lower deck filled with the pungent smell of gunpowder and blood. Thermal imaging is failing, the target has anti-reconnaissance equipment, a mercenary said, his voice tight as he gripped his radio. William was no longer at the top of the stairs. The moment he fired, he had used the cover of his optical camouflage to leap from a second-floor vent into the space above the lower deck's ceiling. He put away the empty submachine guns. In such a cramped space filled with obstacles, cold weapons were more effective than firearms. 2 high-carbon titanium alloy scalpels slid into his palms. William lifted a ventilation louver and, like a graceful spider, dropped silently behind a mercenary who was on high alert with his gun raised. The blade swept across the carotid artery and blood erupted. The dull thud of the body hitting the floor became a death note. He's there. 11 o'clock, rat-tat-tat. Bullets chased the afterimage William left behind. He kept his body extremely low, sliding along the edge of a sofa. A scalpel precisely severed another mercenary's Achilles tendon. The man screamed and fell to his knees. William followed up with a backhand strike, driving the blade into his foramen magnum to destroy the life center. The carnage began. This group of battle-hardened mercenaries completely broke down when faced with a ghost they couldn't see or touch, yet who knew the human body's lethal weaknesses intimately. They formed a defensive circle back-to-back, muzzles pointing blindly in all directions. William was in no hurry to attack. Standing 3 meters outside the circle, he pulled 2 flashbangs from his storage ring. He pulled the pins and rolled them into the center of the circle. Intense light and high-decibel noise exploded simultaneously. The mercenaries clutched their eyes and ears in agony, their formation falling into chaos. William cut into the crowd. With every stroke of his blade, someone fell. He pierced subclavian arteries, severed brachial plexuses, and destroyed sinoatrial nodes. Every movement followed the most rigorous anatomical principles, with no wasted effort, seeking only a one-hit kill. In less than 3 minutes, only the bearded man was left standing in the lower deck. He gasped for air, his eyes bloodshot, clutching a black detonator tightly in his hand. "Come out, you bastard. The whole ship is rigged with C4. If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me." The bearded man roared hysterically. William deactivated the optical camouflage, his figure appearing in the air. Not a single drop of blood stained his tactical suit. He adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses and looked at the bearded man. "It's time for you to die." William's tone was flat. The bearded man froze for a moment. A flash of silver light streaked by. A scalpel precisely pierced the carpal tunnel of the bearded man's right hand, severing the median nerve. The bearded man let out a wretched howl as his fingers instantly lost all grip strength, releasing uncontrollably. The black detonator fell. William pushed off his toes, caught the detonator steadily, and casually stuffed it into his pocket. Clutching his bleeding wrist, the bearded man backed away in terror until his back hit the bulkhead. "Who the hell are you?" "Just a passing doctor." William stepped forward, pulled the scalpel from the man's wrist, and thrust it upward. The blade entered from beneath the mandible, reaching straight into the cranial cavity. The bearded man's pupils dilated and his body slid down. 5 minutes later, the yacht turned into a massive fireball on the sea, then quickly disintegrated and sank to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. All traces were completely smoothed over by the seawater. Malibu Cliff Villa. The dining room was softly lit, and the long dining table was covered with exquisite dishes. Jessica and Tracy had already changed into evening gowns and were feasting on a massive Boston lobster. Tony cut a piece of rare Wagyu beef, put it in his mouth and glanced occasionally at the stairs leading to the second floor. The sound of footsteps echoed. William, wearing a clean white shirt and casual slacks, adjusted the gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose as he walked down the stairs. His hair was slightly damp, carrying a faint scent of body wash. Took a shower. Did I miss the appetizers? William pulled out a chair and sat down. Tony set down his knife and fork and wiped his mouth with a napkin. He glanced at his phone screen. Jarvis's encrypted channel had just sent news of two bizarre serial murders in Santa Monica and downtown, while High Seas radar showed a yacht had exploded. All in less than an hour and a half, 3 elite squads had vanished from the face of the earth. Tony looked at the Asian doctor sitting across from him, who was methodically cutting his steak, and felt a slight chill down his spine. This guy's killing efficiency was even more precise and controllable than Stark Industries' missiles. You didn't miss them, the timing is just right. Tony raised his wine glass, hiding the wariness and awe in his eyes. The cooking of this M9 Wagyu is perfect. William put a piece of beef into his mouth, chewed and swallowed. It is indeed good. However, Mr. Stark, you still need to upgrade your security system. The safety in Lowe's Angels isn't much better than in Hell's Kitchen. Tony smiled. He raised his glass in a distant toast. Put that on tomorrow's schedule. For now, enjoy your dinner, Dr. William. William picked up his wine glass and gave it a light clink. Outside the window, the waves of the Pacific Ocean continued to beat against the reefs, and everything seemed so peaceful. Chapter 85. The outcast student of Gotham University. The plant biochemistry laboratory at Gotham University is located on the lowest floor of Laboratory Building No. 3, lacking natural light year-round. The exterior walls are covered in dense ivy, completely obscuring the Victorian-style pointed narrow windows. Pamela Lillian Eiley stood before a thermostatic workstation. Wearing sterile latex gloves and holding a micropipette, she dripped an extract of Upas tree sap collected from the South American rainforest into a Petri dish containing mouse neuron cells. Under the microscope, the process of alkaloid molecules binding with neuronal synaptic receptors was magnified. Pamela stared through the eyepiece, her breathing slow and steady. She was obsessed with this microscopic level of predation and submission. Plants have no vocal cords, cannot call for help, and cannot express anger through complex facial muscles like humans, but they have evolved the most sophisticated and efficient chemical defense mechanisms on Earth. In comparison, human language and socialization seem tedious and inefficient. The laboratory's electronic door emitted a mechanical beep. Her senior, Sarah, walked in carrying 2 cups of Starbucks Americano. The click-clack of her high heels on the anti-static floor disrupted the room's natural white noise balance. Pamela, mushrooms are going to start growing in your Petri dishes soon. Sarah placed the paper cups at a safe distance, took off her goggles and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Pamela didn't look up. The half-life of Upas extract is extremely short. It loses biological activity after more than 2 minutes outside a thermostatic environment. The thermal radiation from your coffee is interfering with my experimental data. Sarah pulled over a swivel chair and sat down, ignoring her junior's professional warning. Forget those plants, there's a heavyweight academic exchange in the Grand Hall at 2 o'clock. Dr. Elias Thorne is back on campus. You have to come with me. Interested? Pamela recorded the final set of data and pushed the Petri dish into the waste disposal bin. He specializes in psychology and neuroscience. My research focus is plant toxicology and biochemistry. Interdisciplinary socializing is a pure waste of time. Grief, that's Elias Thorne. Sarah raised her voice. A 31-year-old Nobel laureate, the chief collaborating scientist for LexCorp in Metropolis. Most importantly, he's more charismatic than a Hollywood star. All the girls in the School of Life Sciences and the School of Psychology are going crazy. Front row seats are being scalped for $200. Pamela took off her gloves and threw them into the yellow medical waste bin. Mass conformity caused by excessive hormone secretion. You go worship your idol. I need to finish the gene sequencing for this batch of plant neurotoxins. You'd rather deal with these mute vines for the rest of your life than say another word to a living person. Sarah looked at Pamela's face, pale from a chronic lack of sunlight, yet undeniably beautiful, her tone tinged with frustration. Living people betray, lie, and use hypocritical social pleasantries to mask greed. Plants don't. Pamela picked up a spray bottle and misted a Venus flytrap in the corner with nutrient solution. They only need water, sunlight, and carbon dioxide to give back the most authentic life. The lab door was pushed open. Professor Jason Woodrue entered, wearing a somewhat wrinkled tweed suit and clutching a thick project proposal. He was a man in his 50s with a severely receding hairline. The eyes behind his lenses always held the calculating air of a merchant rather than the spirit of a pure scholar. Sarah is right, Pamela, you need to attend this lecture. Woodrue tossed the proposal onto the workstation with a dull thud. Pamela stopped spraying and turned to face her mentor. Professor, my gene sequencing experiment is at a critical stage. Dr. Thorne's dopamine-targeted control theory contributes nothing to botany. A narrow academic horizon is your biggest bottleneck right now. Woodrue tapped the table, his tone brooked no argument. What is the ultimate goal of your research on plant toxins? Is it to make flowers and grass grow more lushly? No, it's to extract active ingredients that can affect biological organisms, especially the human nervous system. Thorne's aerosolized agents have achieved a revolutionary breakthrough in blood-brain barrier penetration technology. If you can find inspiration in his delivery mechanisms, our plant neurotoxin project could secure Phase II venture capital from the military or major pharmaceutical companies. Woodrow's words were blunt and utilitarian. In a city like Gotham, pure academic research could not survive. All theories eventually had to be converted into capital leverage. Pamela resisted the idea of viewing plants as tools for profit, but her current lab access and budget allocations were all in Woodrow's hands. All right, Professor, I'll attend. Pamela lowered her gaze, staring at her pale fingertips. Good, go relax a bit, don't push yourself too hard. Scientific research requires the collision of inspiration, not working in isolation. Woodrow nodded with satisfaction and turned to leave. Sarah leaned in and patted Pamela's shoulder. Let's go, my botany nerd. Change out of that lab coat smelling of formalin and let's go see the pinnacle of high-quality manhood. Pamela took off her lab coat and hung it on the hook behind the door. She changed into an extremely ordinary dark green thick-knit sweater and faded jeans, casually tying her light blonde hair back. The two walked out of the lab building, met by a gust of early autumn wind mixed with Gotham's unique industrial exhaust. The campus's Gothic bell tower chimed for 1:30 p.m. On the main road, crowds of students were flocking toward the Grand Hall. Pamela walked on the edge of the crowd, intentionally maintaining a half-meter physical distance from her surroundings. She looked at the shrubs in the roadside flower beds, withered and yellow from acid rain, and an indescribable sadness welled up in her heart. In this world made of steel, concrete, and capital, plants just like her were misfits. The Gotham University Grand Hall was packed to capacity, its circular tiered seating holding 2,000 people. The air was a mix of cheap perfume, coffee, and paper. In the third row by the aisle, Harleen Frances Quinzel sat cross-legged in her chair. She wore a bright yellow hoodie, her high ponytail swaying behind her head with every movement. A pink hardcover notebook was spread across her knees, her right hand gripping a ballpoint pen as she sketched rapidly on the pages. On the paper was the back of a man wearing a dark black windbreaker. No specific facial features were drawn. The focus was on his slumped shoulders, the posture of his hands in his pockets, and the tense lines of his neck muscles. The margins were crowded with annotations. Reverse pickpocketing maneuver took 0.4 seconds. Involves extreme contraction of the brachyradialis and pronator teres. Non-traditional street fighting style, with strong traces of military grappling and anatomical dismantling. Chronic sleep deprivation, severe dark circle pigmentation, maintains 24/7 radar-like vigilance of surroundings, typical compensatory defense mechanism of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, extreme restraint, unmoved by $30,000 in cash, an abnormal moral baseline, or a much larger source of funding. Harleen bit her pen cap, her bright features twisted in thought. She had named this Asian man she encountered on the street Subject X. In her criminal psychology analysis model, Gotham's criminals were mostly beasts driven by survival instincts, their behavior patterns simple and crude. But Subject X was different. He was like a precision instrument in human skin, maintaining an eerie sense of order in the chaotic streets. What are you drawing? A sketch of a serial killer. Her roommate Amy leaned over, trying to see the contents of the notebook. Harleen quickly snapped the notebook shut and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. An interesting sociological observation subject. Compared to the academic peacock about to appear on stage, the street's mire hides far more authentic psychological specimens. Chapter 86. Harleen's question. You're really beyond help. Amy flipped through the advanced neuroanatomy textbook in her hands. Elias Thorne is the ultimate idol of our psychology major. He proposed the chemical controllability of emotions, which directly overturned the subconscious determinism since Freud. Are you not looking forward to it at all? I am, Harleen said, resting her chin on her hands, a rebellious glint in her eyes. I'm looking forward to seeing where the load-bearing wall of a man trying to play God will develop cracks in his theoretical edifice. It was exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. A low engine roar echoed from outside the auditorium. Through the tall floor-to-ceiling glass windows, 5 all-black bulletproof Cadillac SUVs could be seen driving into the campus square. Over a dozen LexCorp security personnel, dressed in black tactical suits and wearing communication headsets, were the first to disembark. They quickly set up a cordon, isolating the onlookers of students from the area. This kind of display appeared extremely jarring within the ivory tower. The door of the middle vehicle opened, and Elias Thorne stepped out. He wore a light gray bespoke casual suit without a tie, and his eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses were gentle and deep. He ignored the over-nervousness of the security personnel, smiling and waving to the surrounding students as he walked into the auditorium with a composed pace. Thunderous applause erupted inside the auditorium. Pamela and Sarah sat in a corner in the back row. Sarah clapped her hands repeatedly in excitement, while Pamela expressionlessly flipped through a copy of Illustrated Handbook of Poisonous South American Plants, completely blocking out the external noise. Elias walked up to the podium without using his prepared speech. He adjusted the height of the microphone, his gaze slowly sweeping across the room. "Good afternoon, Gotham." His voice was magnetic and had a strong, psychologically soothing effect. "Returning here and smelling the familiar scent of chemical plant exhaust in the air is the only way I'm certain I'm truly home." A proper humorous opening drew a round of friendly laughter from the audience. Since the beginning of history, humanity has been fighting an invisible enemy. Elias got down to business, and a complex topological map of brain neurons appeared on the holographic projection screen behind him. This enemy is called pain, depression, anxiety, mania, sadness. We use religion to soothe it, philosophy to explain it, and psychological counseling to guide it. But the results have been minimal. He pressed the page-turning pen and a molecular structure appeared on the screen. Pain is not a punishment from the gods, nor is it a flaw of the soul. From a neurobiological perspective, it is merely a piece of redundant code left over from evolution. It is the overactivity of the amygdala, a physical blockage of the serotonin and dopamine secretion pathways. Elias spread his arms, a fanatical glow of idealism showing in his tone. "My team has developed a targeted aerosol medication. It can precisely penetrate the blood-brain barrier and reach the emotional centers directly, repairing those broken synapses and re-establishing chemical links to happiness." The molecular structure on the holographic screen began to dynamically reorganize, simulating the three-dimensional process of the drug molecules binding with neurotransmitter receptors. "We no longer need to endure long psychological treatments, nor do we need to dissect those bloody childhood traumas. With just one simple aerosol inhalation, the brain will be reshaped. Sadness will be excised and fear will be stripped away. Humanity will usher in true eternal chemical bliss." The auditorium was silent. Several old professors in the front row took off their reading glasses and stared at the data models on the screen, their hands shaking physiologically from excessive excitement. Once this technology reaches mass production, it would not only be a Nobel Prize-level achievement but also a complete subversion of the entire human social structure. Harleen sat in the third row, her ballpoint pen frozen in midair. She didn't look at the data on the screen. Her gaze was fixed firmly on Elias' face on the podium. Perfect, impeccably perfect. The tailored suit had not a single wrinkle. The amplitude of his gestures during the speech was controlled within the absolute golden ratio, and even the frequency of his pauses for breath had been precisely calculated. This kind of person is a savior in the eyes of the public, but in Harleen's psychological radar, he was an extremely dangerous specimen of a pervert. God complex. Harleen wrote these 4 words in her pink hardcover notebook and underlined them twice heavily. True compassion is flawed and produces emotional fluctuations due to empathy. But there was no compassion in Elias' eyes, only a high and mighty downward gaze. He wasn't healing humanity. He was treating humans like programs whose code could be modified at will. Back row corner Pamela, who had been immersed in the illustrated handbook of poisonous South American plants, suddenly looked up. Her hearing keenly caught professional terms like targeted aerosol and blood-brain barrier penetration. Her gaze bypassed the dense crowd and fell on the molecular formula on the holographic screen. "Macromolecular lipid-soluble encapsulation technology," Pamela murmured to herself, her brow furrowing slightly. The biggest technical barrier to her stagnant phytoneurotoxin project was that large toxin molecules could not effectively penetrate the natural defense mechanisms of biological organisms. If she could borrow this aerosol-encapsulated delivery path, the lethal spores she cultivated could directly take over the central nervous system within 0.1 seconds of contact with the respiratory tract. "What are you writing down?" Sarah leaned over and found that Pamela had at some point listed a long string of complex biochemical transformation formulas on her scratch paper. "A more efficient pollination mechanism." Pamela brushed her off casually, her gaze returning to the book, but the gears in her mind had already begun to engage in frantic calculations. She was indifferent to human joys and sorrows, but this technology itself was an untapped gold mine for botany. The 40-minute academic presentation ended, and the interactive Q&A session began. The atmosphere in the auditorium reached its peak. Students scrambled to raise their hands, asking various routine questions about the clinical application, side effects, and market pricing of the medication. Elias answered with ease, every response being airtight, drawing bursts of applause. Harleen stuffed her pink notebook into her hoodie pocket and stood up. She didn't raise her hand. She stepped directly over the back of the front row seat and walked down the stairs to the microphone in the main aisle. Her bright yellow hoodie was particularly eye-catching in the dark-toned academic atmosphere of the room. The LexCorp security personnel responsible for maintaining order pressed their earpieces and prepared to step forward to stop her. But Elias on the podium raised his hand in a restraining gesture. "What is your question?" Elias maintained a gentle smile, his gaze falling on Harleen Quinzel, freshman psychology major. Harleen held the microphone stand with both hands, leaning forward, a raw sharpness in her eyes. "Dr. Thorne, your theory is built on a fundamental assumption that pain is useless redundancy. But from an evolutionary psychology perspective, pain and fear are the core mechanisms for organisms to avoid lethal risks. The whole room went quiet, and several old professors turned to look at this freshman who didn't know the heights of the heavens. Harleen didn't pause, her speaking speed extremely fast. A lab mouse that has had its amygdala removed and lost its sense of fear will actively walk into a mousetrap. If you use chemical means to forcibly strip humans of negative emotions, will we still run when we encounter danger? Will we still feel anger when faced with social injustice? She looked directly into Elia's eyes, throwing out her final sharp point. You are not eliminating pain. You are performing a large-scale chemical castration on the entire human society. Whose interests does a population that has lost its will to resist serve most? Is it LexCorp or you, this high-end Midas savior? The entire audience erupted in an uproar. Chapter 87, Total Liquidation. The clamor of the crowd made the dome of the grand auditorium hum. The elderly professors in the front row whispered to each other, showing their displeasure at the sharp challenge from this freshman. Security personnel had already flanked in from the side aisles, preparing to forcibly take away the microphone. Elias on the podium did not get angry. He adjusted his collar and raised his right hand in a pressing gesture, and the security personnel retreated to their original positions. MS. Quinzel, a very classic evolutionary psychology defensive question. Elias looked levelly at the girl in the bright yellow hoodie, his tone gentle without any condescending pressure. Animals do need fear to escape predators, but humans are already at the top of the food chain. The dangers we face today are no longer saber-tooths in the jungle, but mortgages, unemployment, and interpersonal friction. The chronic stress generated by these social structures and the excessive anxiety they cause are destroying our immune systems. He spread his hands, and the holographic screen behind him timely switched to a chaotic map of modern human brainwaves. Rational resistance does not need to come at the cost of self-destructive pain. What the potion strips away is internal friction, leaving behind pure judgment. A patient so tortured by depression that they cannot even get out of bed cannot even save themselves. How can they fight against social injustice? Elias leaned forward, his voice carrying an intense, infectious power. I am not castrating human will. I am helping humanity shed the historical baggage of evolution, allowing us to make choices in a state of absolute rationality. Applause that erupted from the audience was even more enthusiastic than before. Harley curled her lip and released the microphone stand. This set of sophistical debating techniques was extremely deceptive, cleverly reducing grand social ethical issues to a matter of clinical medical utility. She stepped down the stairs back to her seat, opened her pink hardbound notebook and quickly wrote a note under Elias' name. A master of sophistry, using closed-loop logic to cover up a desire for control. A seamless perfection that is itself the biggest flaw. Harley bit her pen cap, her gaze piercing through the crowd to stare fixedly at the man on the podium. True compassion produces emotional fluctuations, but in Elias' eyes there was only a downward gaze. The lecture ended in a feverish atmosphere and students crowded toward the several exits. Pamela moved against the flow of people, heading straight for the podium. Two LexCorp security guards in black tactical suits reached out to block her path. Sorry, Dr. Thorne does not accept private interviews or signatures. Pamela ignored the arms across her chest and spoke directly from 2 meters away. How does your macromolecular fat-soluble encapsulation technology solve the problem of protease degradation when breaking through the blood-brain barrier? Dr. Thorne, your model skipped this part of the reaction equation. Elias, who was packing up experimental data, stopped his movements. He looked up at the girl in the dark green thick-knit sweater. There was no fan-like frenzy, no worship, only pure academic questioning, even carrying a hint of a thirst for knowledge. Let her through. Elias waved the security away. Pamela walked to the front of the stage, her gaze passing over Elias to stare at the data terminal on his desk. Are you from the School of Biochemistry? Elias observed her pale complexion and the plant juice pigment remaining under her fingernails. Plant biochemistry. Pamela Eiley. Her tone was flat, omitting all social pleasantries. Your delivery mechanism can solve the absorption loss of plant neurotoxins in the human body. Nanoliposomes are extremely unstable in weakly acidic environments. I need specific targeting binding data to correct my spore culture model. Elias smiled. Everyone in the auditorium was focused on how this technology could save the human soul, yet this girl saw a potion capable of changing human history as nothing more than a useful chemical delivery box for her plant toxins. MS. Eiley, that data is a top commercial secret of LexCorp. Elias pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it over. I'm open to interdisciplinary discussions. My lab in Metropolis always welcomes valuable minds. If you have ideas on improving liposome stability, email me. Pamela took the card, glanced at the email address, turned and left without even a polite word of thanks. Elias watched her back and pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses. The soil of Gotham can indeed grow some unique mutant plants. The perspective returns to marvel. In the restaurant, there was only the light sound of cutlery clinking against porcelain plates. Jessica stuffed the last piece of Boston lobster into her mouth, her cheeks bulging high as she reached for the black truffle caviar in the center of the table. Tracy kicked her under the table, warning her with a look to mind her table manners. Jessica rolled her eyes and spread the caviar onto a baguette. Tony poured half a glass of bourbon down his throat, the liquid stinging. He pushed the empty glass to the waiter nearby. Jarvis, Tony said. Yes, sir. Off all of Obadiah Stane's top-level access at Stark Industries. Everything: financial approvals, weapons R&D databases, security keys. Notify the legal department to prepare indictment materials. Pepper stood to the side, holding a tablet, her fingertips sliding quickly across the screen. Tony, on what charges? Treason, international money laundering, hearing for murder, and embezzlement. Tony crossed his hands under his chin. Package his shady transaction records from the Middle East and send them anonymously to the FBI, CIA, and the editor-in-chief of the New York Times. Pepper finished her operations on the tablet and looked up. Tony, Obadiah has many supporters on the board. If we indict directly, the stock price will face another round of plummeting. Those people on Wall Street don't care who the traitor is, they only care about profits. Then let them see what real profit is, Tony snorted. Hold a press conference tomorrow. Announce that Stark Industries is entering the clean energy field, and send the proposal for the civilian use of the arc reactor to all the major investment banks. Them that closing the weapons division isn't the end, monopolizing the global energy market is. As long as there's enough profit, those old guys will tie Obadiah up themselves and deliver him to the police station door. William cut a piece of rare Wagyu beef. A preemptive strike, using the new energy cake to shut the board's mouths and then using legal means to nail Obadiah to the pillar of shame. Mr. Stark, your business tactics are more lethal than your armor. Just don't want him to ever have the chance to touch another piece of metal belonging to Stark Industries again. Tony finished the whiskey in his glass. William cut a small piece of asparagus from the side dish. You wanted to leave him some dignity before. It was 3 hours ago. Tony stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the rolling Pacific Ocean waves outside. Since he could hire mercenaries to bring C4 explosives to my home and wouldn't even spare the friends around me, that pathetic scrap of uncle-nephew sentiment is completely gone. I want him to spend the rest of his life in ADX Florence, facing 2 square meters of concrete wall every day, wearing handcuffs and leg irons even during recreation time. William swallowed the asparagus. Medical conditions at ADX are very poor. At his age, heart and blood pressure problems are likely. If you want him to live longer to suffer more, I can offer a few cases of targeted medicine as a friendly sponsorship. Tony turned his head and looked at William. Doctor. William, your healer's heart being applied to an enemy is truly eye-opening. It's called sustainable punishment. William put down his knife and fork. Jessica gulped down a large mouthful of Long Island iced tea and let out a loud burp. Boss, you rich people solve problems in such a troublesome way. Back in Hell's Kitchen, an old guy like that would just be put in a sack and thrown into the Hudson River to feed the fish. Why bother sending him to prison? It just wastes taxpayers' money on his meals. Live in a society ruled by law. William pulled out a napkin to wipe his mouth. Stark Industries is a listed company, not an Irish gang. Tony needs to clean house legally and compliantly to steady those vampires on Wall Street. Tony snapped his fingers. Exactly. Making him lose his reputation in public and stripping him of all property and power is more painful for him than killing him. Chapter 88, Tearing Off the Mask. Mr. Stark, there are rumors on Wall Street that a fierce conflict broke out within the Stark Industries board of directors last night. May I ask if calling this emergency press conference today is to announce the company's bankruptcy and liquidation? Downtown Los Angeles, the press conference hall of Stark Tower. Flashbulbs flickered like a minor thunderstorm, and the reporters in the front row almost shoved their microphones onto the edge of the podium. Tony Stark wore a perfectly tailored high-end suit without a tie. He reached out and tapped the microphone, producing a harsh buzzing sound, and the room instantly fell silent. Bankruptcy? You're overthinking it, my friend from Forbes. A mocking curve hooked the corner of Tony's mouth. Stark Industries' cash flow is enough to buy your newspaper and burn it down 100 times over. I've invited everyone here today just to do some spring cleaning. Spring cleaning. The reporters below looked at each other in confusion. That's right, cleaning out a piece of stinking trash that's been hidden in the company's upper management for 30 years. Tony snapped his fingers. The massive holographic projection screen behind him instantly lit up. The image was not a PPT for a new Stark Industries product, but rather a piece of grainy surveillance footage. In a sand-swept Afghan valley, several Turban 10 Rings gang terrorists were unloading weapon crates emblazoned with the Stark Industries logo from several heavy trucks. Immediately after the screen split, on the right appeared a dense list of bank statements, along with a technically restored recording of an encrypted phone call. $20 million has been deposited into the Cayman Islands account. I want your guarantee that Tony Stark absolutely does not walk out of that desert alive. Voice from the recording was low, raspy, and carried an unquestionable coldness. Dead silence filled the room. All the reporters covering finance and political news were simply too familiar with this voice. This was the voice of the second-in-command and veteran figure of Stark Industries, Obadiah Stane. Boom, after a brief silence, the press hall erupted like a high-explosive grenade had been thrown into it. My God, Obadiah hired assassins to kill his own CEO. This is treason. He actually sold weapons to the Ten Rings gang. Huge news, absolute front-page headline. Tony leaned his hands on the podium, looking at the reporters who had fallen into a frenzy below, his eyes as cold as ice. As you can see, the smuggling routes for these weapons, the evidence of financial fraud, and the flow of funds for the assassination have already been simultaneously carbon copied to the FBI, CIA, and the Los Angeles Police Department. Tony stood up straight and straightened the hem of his suit jacket. Stark Industries will not only permanently close its weapons manufacturing division, but we will also fully enter the field of clean energy. The civilian application plan for the arc reactor will be placed on the desks of major investment banks this afternoon. As for Obadiah Stane, Tony stared into the camera, enunciating every word. I will watch with my own eyes in court as he puts on an orange prison uniform. At the same time, in the wealthy area of Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, bang. The sturdy oak door was smashed open directly by a heavy battering ram, wood chips flying everywhere. FBI, don't move, get down. A dozen fully armed federal agents carrying M4A1 carbines swarmed into this luxurious villa covering thousands of square meters like a tide. Infrared aiming dots swept frantically across expensive Persian rugs and antique vases. First floor clear, no target found on the second floor. The underground garage is empty. The leading agent walked into the study with a grim expression. On the desk sat a half-drunk glass of Romanée Conti red wine next to a cigar ashtray that was still smoldering. The hard drive of the computer host had been brutally smashed physically, scattered all over the floor. Officer, he's gone! An agent walked in to report. Judging by the temperature of the wine, he left no more than half an hour ago. He had an inside contact and received word in advance. Leading agent slammed a fist onto the desk. Immediately seal off Los Angeles airports, ports, and highways. Send his photo to every patrolman. He won't get far, but he knew in his heart that for a billionaire of Obadiah's level, once they were on guard, wanting to disappear in this country was as easy as turning over a hand. Malibu, Cliff Villa. William leaned back on the soft leather sofa, holding a can of iced cola. On the oversized LCD TV in front of him, a split screen was broadcasting Tony's press conference and the news of the FBI's failed raid on Obadiah's mansion. Tisk, the efficiency of the U.S. police is as touching as ever. Jessica sat cross-legged on the carpet, holding a large bowl of cheese popcorn, mumbling a complaint while stuffing it into her mouth. Don't movies always play it out like this? The police always show up only after the job is done. But that old man runs fast, he's practically like a loach. William took a sip of cola and pushed up the gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose. In China there is an old saying, if you don't pull out the weeds by the roots they will grow again when the spring breeze blows. William turned his head looking at Tony, who had just returned from the press conference and was taking off his suit jacket. Mr. Stark, this good uncle of yours is clearly not the type to be willing to linger on in a sewer, since he dared to hire mercenaries to blow up your home, and now that he's been backed into a corner, his counterattack will only be more frantic. Tony threw his jacket to a robotic arm and walked to the bar to pour a glass of whiskey. Jarvis is scanning the nationwide surveillance network. Tony took a sip of his drink, his gaze stern. His passport has been frozen and his overseas accounts are all locked. What kind of waves can an old man with no money and no power stir up? Don't be too confident, Tony. Pepper walked in wearing high heels, holding a freshly printed document, her face somewhat pale. I just checked the company's internal asset database. In the 16th district on the outskirts of Los Angeles, there is an abandoned Stark Industries underground warehouse. 3 months ago, Obadiah cut off the surveillance network there in his private name and requisitioned a large amount of specialized alloy materials. Tony's movements paused. Specialized alloy. What does he want to do? Build a bunker? Unclear. Pepper shook her head, but there is definitely a problem there. William stood up and accurately threw the empty soda can into the trash bin 3 meters away. It seems the source of the illness has been found. Do you need me to make an emergency house call? William flexed his wrists. No. Tony set down his glass, the arc reactor in his chest emitting a faint blue light through his shirt. This is Stark family business. Dr. William, you've already helped me clear out the trash on the periphery. This remaining big rat, I have to step on it myself. Tony turned and walked toward the stairs leading to the underground lab. Jarvis, has the flight attitude tuning for Mark Roman 3 been completed? Sir, the stratospheric icing issue for Mark Roman 3 has been resolved, but combat testing has not yet been conducted. The current danger coefficient is 42%. Enough, prepare for suiting up. Outskirts of Los Angeles, the abandoned warehouse in the 16th district, 30 meters deep underground, this place had long since been transformed into an extremely hidden heavy industry laboratory. Blinding welding sparks flew beneath a massive gantry crane. Obadiah Stane wore an anti-static work uniform, his signature bald head gleaming under the incandescent lights. He held a cigar in his hand and was staring intently forward. In front of him stood an extremely massive, crude, and violent aesthetic steel mecha. It was nearly 4 meters tall, with armor thickness 3 times that of Mark I. The right arm was mounted with an improved Gatling heavy machine gun. In the left arm was a micro anti-tank missile launcher. This was the wreckage of the Mark I that Tony had abandoned in the desert, which he had bought back from the Ten Rings gang at a high price. After several months of reverse engineering, he had created this ultimate war machine, Iron Monger. Mr. Stain, a chief scientist in a white coat, ran over drenched in sweat, holding a tablet computer, his voice trembling. The armor's transmission system and weapon fire control have all been interfaced. But what? Obadiah exhaled a thick cloud of smoke, his gaze sinister. But the power issue cannot be resolved. The scientist swallowed hard. Our existing battery technology simply cannot support this mecha for even a minute of high-intensity combat. We need that miniature arc reactor. Obadiah's expression instantly darkened. He strode over to the scientist, grabbed him by the collar and lifted him off the ground. I gave you hundreds of millions in R&D funding. I gave you the top laboratory, and now you're telling me you can't build a reactor the size of a palm. Tony Stark built it in a broken cave in Afghanistan with a pile of scrap metal. You bunch of idiots with PhD titles are actually telling me it can't be done. The scientist was being strangled and couldn't breathe, his face turning red as he struggled desperately. I'm sorry, Mr. Stain, that technology simply doesn't conform to existing physical common sense. It's not something a human can build. We are not Tony Stark. Useless? Obadiah threw the scientist onto the ground like a piece of trash. He turned his head, looking at the imposing yet lifeless Iron Monger, the madness in his eyes gradually igniting. He had watched the live broadcast of the press conference. He knew he was now the most wanted criminal in the US, his shares in Stark Industries had become a pile of waste paper, and his 30 years of hard work had been completely destroyed by a single sentence from Tony Stark. Tony, my dear nephew. Obadiah walked to the workbench and picked up a silver miniature device only the size of a lighter. It was a high-frequency sonic paralyzer, specifically used to deal with high-value targets with strong defenses. He stared at the phone on the screen of the blue-glowing reactor on Tony's chest, his mouth twisting into an extremely hideous smile. Since this group of useless trash can't build it, then I'll just have to go take the ready-made one. Obadiah pocketed the sonic generator and threw on a black trench coat. You think you've won? No, Tony. You've just been keeping the key safe for me for a while. He strode toward the private elevator leading to the surface. Once I get that heart, I'll wear this armor and personally go to your cliff villa to twist your head off as my trophy for taking over this empire. Chapter 89. Heading to Stark Industries headquarters, Jarvis sift through Los Angeles traffic monitoring network again. Can that old geezer burrow underground? Tony Stark's irritable voice echoed in the cavernous underground room. He spread his arms, standing on a circular disassembly platform. Several robotic arms were methodically removing the heavy red and gold armor of the Mark Roman III piece by piece. Sir, I have accessed the highest level of authorization, but Obadiah Stain's whereabouts completely vanished near Sector 16, leaving no electronic thermal imaging traces. Jarvis's voice remained steady. Keep looking, even if you have to flip Los Angeles upside down. Tony rubbed his throbbing brow and stepped down from the disassembly platform. The Malibu Cliff Villa was quiet in the dead of night. Pepper had driven to Stark Tower half an hour ago. The mess left by Obadiah and tomorrow's new energy project required her, the CEO assistant, to work through the night to settle everything. In the guest room on the second floor, Jessica and Tracy were sleeping soundly, aided by alcohol and the sea breeze. Meanwhile, William, staying in the east guest room, was not asleep. He sat cross-legged on the bed with his eyes closed. Although the side effects of opening the first gate of the 8 inner gates had been repaired by targeted medication, his physical senses had been permanently elevated to a higher level. Amidst the white noise of waves crashing against the rocks, he could clearly distinguish the hydraulic sounds of the robotic arms in the laboratory downstairs, as well as Tony's slightly hurried breathing. Suddenly, an extremely sharp high-frequency sound wave, exceeding the normal human hearing threshold, exploded in the underground room without warning. On the second floor, William snapped his eyes open, a cold glint flashing in his dark pupils. 2 minutes ago in the underground room, Tony had just removed the last piece of his chest plate when that pervasive high-frequency sound wave instantly pierced his eardrums, reaching straight to his cerebral cortex, let out an extremely stifled groan. His motor nerves were completely cut off at that moment. His legs felt as if the bones had been removed, and he collapsed heavily to his knees, his hands clawing desperately at the cold floor tiles, yet he couldn't even bend a single finger. His vision began to blur, and the ringing in his ears felt like 10,000 hornets swarming in his head. Jarvis, Tony desperately moved his lips but couldn't make a sound. Waste your energy, Tony. This little gadget can paralyze your central nervous system for a full 15 minutes. A pair of expensive custom leather shoes appeared in Tony's blurred vision. Obadiah Stane, wearing a black trench coat and holding that silver sonic emitter, slowly emerged from the dark backup passage leading to the garage. The old fox's face bore a hideous smile as if the outcome were already decided. Tony's eyes were bloodshot as he stared intently at the man he had called uncle for 30 years. SHH, don't speak. Your heart rate must be very fast right now. Now listen to me slowly. Tony, my dear nephew, you have truly disappointed me. You think closing the weapons division will save the world? You're destroying 30 years of the Stark family's foundation. Obadiah crouched down, greed and madness in his eyes as he ripped open Tony's shirt. The new arc reactor in his chest, emitting a faint blue glow, was completely exposed to the air. I spent hundreds of millions of dollars supporting a group of top physics PhDs, and they actually told me this thing couldn't be built. Obadiah pulled a specially made extractor from his pocket and jammed it firmly into the groove on the edge of the reactor. But it doesn't matter. Since you've built it, consider it your final gift to your uncle. Ugh, Tony's eyes bulged as he watched Obadiah turn the extractor, with a soft PSHH sound. The power source connected to the electromagnet in his heart was forcibly pulled out. Tony's chest instantly plunged into deathly darkness, and a sharp, agonizing pain accompanied by a sense of suffocation flooded over him like a tide. This heart is a complete waste on you. Obadiah stuffed the blue glowing reactor into his pocket, stood up and straightened the collar of his trench coat. Goodbye, Tony. I'll take good care of this empire for you. Obadiah didn't give Tony on the floor another look, turning to stride toward the private elevator leading directly to the garage. In the underground room, only Tony's heavy, wheezing breaths remained, sounding like a broken bellows. Warning, sir's vital signs are dropping rapidly. Ventricular fibrillation, ischemic shock. Jarvis's mechanical voice blared alarms frantically throughout the laboratory. Tony rolled over onto his back. His vision had begun to darken, and the hole in his chest felt like a black hole, voraciously consuming his last bits of life force. He struggled to turn his head toward the workbench not far away. There, a transparent glass box sat. Inside was the original reactor he had first built in the Afghanistan cave, with a line of words engraved by Pepper, proof that Tony Stark has a heart. That was his only chance of survival. Tony bit the tip of his tongue, using the sharp pain to force his nerves into action. Trembling, he reached out his right hand and, like a dying fish, crawled inch by inch toward the workbench, 1 meter, half a meter. Just as his fingertips were about to touch the edge of the workbench, his strength was completely exhausted, and his arm slammed heavily onto the floor. With a sealed alloy door of the underground room was kicked open by an extremely violent force, the thick door panel flew out like a piece of paper, smashing into the distant wall and shaking down a large cloud of dust. William, wearing his signature deep black windbreaker, strode into the laboratory, but he was a step too late and had let Obadiah slip away. Mr. Stark, your defenses are practically thinner than paper. William quickly stepped forward and flipped Tony over. Looking at the empty cavity in his chest, William frowned slightly. With the electromagnet losing power, those tiny shrapnel pieces were flowing backward with the blood, stabbing toward Tony's heart. Save me. Tony's pupils began to dilate, and his fingers trembled as he pointed toward the glass box on the workbench. I know, shut up and save your strength. Today you owe me another life, remember to repay me well in the future. William stood up and walked to the workbench. The display case was made of high-strength bulletproof glass with a complex electronic combination lock next to it. William didn't care about any password. He took a deep breath, his core muscles tightening instantly as power transferred along his spine to his right arm. Although he hadn't opened any of the 8 inner gates, the explosive power of his modified muscle fibers was still extremely terrifying. No fancy moves, just a basic straight punch, bang. Accompanied by a deafening roar, the bulletproof glass, strong enough to withstand small-caliber rifle fire, exploded into a cloud of shards under William's fist. William grabbed the crude original reactor from inside and turned back to Tony. How do you install this? Just shove it in. Whatever, desperate times call for desperate measures. As an underground doctor, although William was proficient in human anatomy, he truly didn't have much experience with this kind of cyberpunk-style mechanical organ. He aimed at the copper wire interface in the cavity, pressed the original reactor in firmly, and gave it a sharp clockwise twist. Click, the gears engaged and the faint blue light lit up once again. Hiss ha! Tony gasped sharply, his chest heaving violently. His stagnant blood began to circulate again and the electromagnet resumed its work, firmly holding those lethal shrapnel pieces at the edge of his ventricles. Tony lay on the floor, gasping for air in great gulps, sweat soaking his back. William pulled over a swivel chair and sat down, taking an alcohol wipe from his pocket and slowly wiping the glass shards from his fist. Do you need me to prescribe some quick-acting heart-saving pills? Obadiah. Tony gritted his teeth, struggling to get up from the floor, the fury in his eyes seemingly capable of burning through the entire laboratory. He took my new reactor. That old dog must have built some kind of steel monster like mine, otherwise he wouldn't have stolen my reactor. Tony leaned on the workbench, stumbling toward the armor assembly station on the other side. Jarvis, activate the Mark Roman 3. Begin the suiting up procedure? Sir, your vital signs are currently in an extremely dangerous state. It is recommended that you rest in bed immediately. Jarvis's electronic voice carried a hint of warning. Shut up, do as I say, Tony roared. The robotic arms descended quickly, beginning to cover Tony piece by piece with the heavy red and gold armor. Mr. Stark, as your attending physician, I must remind you, William said, sitting in the swivel chair, his tone calm without a hint of fluctuation. You just experienced severe acute myocardial ischemia. Putting on hundreds of pounds of scrap metal to go fight now gives your heart an 80% chance of going on strike immediately. In medicine, we call that sudden death. If I don't stop him, more people will die. Tony's faceplate dropped with a clank, and his electronic eyes lit up with a blinding white light. He has the power source. Once that monster enters the city, the Los Angeles Police Department won't be able to stop it at all. Bang! The thrusters under his feet blasted hot plasma flames, and the Mark Roman 3 smashed directly through the laboratory's reinforced glass ceiling, streaking into the dark Los Angeles night sky like a meteor. Rich people are so headstrong, never following doctors' orders. William looked at the drafty hole above his head and sighed helplessly. If Tony died at Obadiah's hands, his 10% stake in Stark Industries and the top-tier medical equipment would all go down the drain. This deal absolutely cannot be a loss. William turned, rushed to the second floor, and kicked open Jessica's door. The large bed, Jessica lay sprawled out, clutching a pillow tightly, with one leg hanging outside the quilt and a trace of glistening drool at the corner of her mouth, sleeping like a log. Beside her, Tracy, wearing an eye mask, rolled over and continued sleeping. Up, time to work. William walked over and unceremoniously kicked the leg of the bed. Don't bother me, I haven't finished my barbecue yet, Jessica muttered, rolling over and burying her head in the pillow. Tony Stark is about to go to his death. William stood over her with his arms crossed. If he dies, your 5-star hotels, private planes, and that Boston lobster you just ate will all have to be paid for out of your own pocket, deducted from your salary. This sentence was more effective than any alarm clock. Jessica sprang up from the bed as if she'd been electrocuted. Her eyes weren't even fully open yet, but her hand had already grabbed the denim shorts at the head of the bed. Who dares touch my free meals? Jessica irritably grabbed a handful of her messy hair. Who? I'll go twist his head off and kick it like a ball. Get dressed, see you in the garage. William turned and left the room. 3 minutes later, the garage door of the Malibu Cliff Villa swung open. A silver gray sports car with the screeching sound of burning tires charged onto the Pacific Coast Highway like a maddened beast. Jessica sat in the driver's seat, her foot pressing the accelerator all the way to the floor. The intense G-force forced William to reach out and grab the handle on the roof. This crappy sports car's chassis is too low. It doesn't suit my driving habits at all, Jessica complained loudly while frantically weaving through traffic. Boss, where are we going? Stark Industries headquarters. William looked at the route map synchronized by Jarvis on his micro-terminal. Drive faster. If we get there late, we might only be able to collect the body of this billionaire. The sports car's engine let out a deafening roar, tearing through the Los Angeles night like a silver bolt of lightning, heading straight for the heart of the metropolis. Chapter 90. The descent of Ironmonger. Click. The deep blue miniature arc reactor was pressed ruthlessly into the energy slot on Ironmonger's chest by Obadiah Stane's rough hands, then twisted tightly clockwise. Hum. A low-pitched hum instantly resounded throughout the entire underground warehouse. Massive amounts of energy surged frantically along the crude industrial-grade drive shafts into the body of this nearly 4-meter-tall steel beast. The electronic eyes on the mech's head lit up with a crimson glow. This is the feeling. Sitting in the cramped cockpit, Obadiah felt the feedback from the control stick, the flesh on his face contorting into a mask of extreme ecstasy. He raised his mechanical left arm, equipped with a Gatling heavy machine gun, and swung it violently. Boom! A nearby gantry crane weighing several tons was smashed directly into 2 pieces by this pure mechanical violence, the ear-piercing sound of twisting steel setting one's teeth on edge. Tony, my dear nephew. Obadiah's voice came through the mech's external speakers, carrying an echo like a demon crawling out of hell. You simply don't understand what true power is. You're closing the weapons division. You want to be a saint. Then I'll smash your pathetic company along with your naivety into scrap metal. He slammed the control stick forward. The thick thrusters at Ironmonger's feet spewed out scorching orange-red exhaust flames. Bang. The solid underground warehouse ceiling was smashed through by the steel beast, with dirt, rebar, and concrete blocks falling like rain. Carrying unstoppable kinetic energy, Ironmonger broke through the surface and headed straight for the Stark Industries headquarters in downtown Los Angeles. If he couldn't have it, then he would destroy it completely. In the pitch-black night sky of Los Angeles, bang! A red and gold meteor streaked across the night sky, a sonic boom cloud exploding behind it. Jarvis, have you locked onto the target? Tony gritted his teeth. The first-generation arc reactor in his chest was clearly struggling to provide power, and his breathing was becoming heavy. Sir, the thermal signal is at your 11 o'clock, moving at high speed towards Stark Industries headquarters. The target is massive and its thruster power is 3 times yours. Old dog, he's moving pretty fast. Tony's eyes behind the mask were cold. Full power thrusters. I absolutely cannot let him get near the city. Mark Roman 3 drew an extreme arc in the sky, cutting directly into Ironmonger's flight path. "Obadiah, give me back my heart!" Tony roared, and the miniature missile launcher pods on his shoulders instantly popped open. Swoosh, swoosh. Swoosh, 6 armor-piercing miniature missiles trailed white smoke, accurately striking Ironmonger's broad back. Boom, firelight exploded in the night sky. But as the smoke cleared, only a few shallow black marks remained on Ironmonger's insanely thick armor. "Tony," Obadiah laughed maniacally in the cockpit. "You're actually not dead yet. It seems that underground doctor from your pathetic clinic really has some skill. But it doesn't matter, your uncle will be merciful today and kill you once more." Ironmonger suddenly spun around in midair, its thick Gatling gun aiming at Mark Roman 3. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat, tongues of fire spat out as large-caliber depleted uranium armor-piercing rounds swept toward Tony like a metal storm. Damn it, Tony rolled continuously in the air, narrowly avoiding the barrage. Bullets grazed Mark I's leg armor, kicking up a trail of dazzling sparks. "Your toy is too small, Tony," Obadiah roared as Ironmonger's thrusters suddenly erupted, its massive frame performing a collision in midair that defied aerodynamics. Bang! The two armors slammed into each other violently midair. The absolute disadvantage in weight caused Tony to suffer immediately. Like a baseball hit by a bat, Mark Roman 3 was pinned down by Ironmonger and smashed toward the downtown Los Angeles area below. Warning, armor integrity has dropped to 82%. Backup energy output is unstable. Jarvis's frantic warning echoed inside the helmet. "Shut up. Concentrate all energy into the chest unibeam." Tony was dazed by the impact, but he gripped Ironmonger's arm tightly, the light on his chest suddenly flaring up. Boom! A thick plasma beam blasted into Ironmonger's chest plate at point-blank range. Obadiah was thrown back by the massive recoil, and the two mechs separated in midair, each trailing long plumes of thick smoke as they crashed toward the distant city blocks. And the direction they were falling was precisely toward Stark Industries' headquarters. Screech! The silver-gray Audi R8 sports car left a scorched tire mark over 10 meters long on the plaza in front of the Stark Industries headquarters building before coming to a steady stop. Jessica kicked open the car door and leaned against a nearby trash can, retching twice. "I swear I'm never driving a car with such low ground clearance again. The speed bumps in Los Angeles are practically anti-human. My tailbone is about to be shaken to pieces." William pushed open the passenger door and straightened his windbreaker, which had been ruffled by the night wind. He glanced at the dozens of stories tall, brightly lit Stark Tower in front of him. The surrounding streets were still peaceful, and there were even a few white-collar workers who had finished overtime walking out with coffee. "Puke in the car, the repair costs will be deducted from your salary next month," William said in a flat tone. "Evil capitalist." Jessica wiped her mouth and straightened up. "What are we doing here, looking at the night view?" "We're here for spring cleaning." William raised his wrist to check his watch, his gaze instantly turning cold. "Jessica, listen carefully. Rush into the building right now and find Pepper Potts. Tell her to trigger the highest level fire alarm and clear all the overtime wage slaves out of this building to 3 blocks away within 3 minutes. Huh? Jessica was stunned for a moment. "A fire drill in the middle of the night. The security guards will treat me like a lunatic and kick me out, then dislocate the security guard's jaws." William pulled a high-carbon titanium alloy scalpel from the strap on his outer thigh and twirled it between his fingertips. Multi-ton chunks of iron are about to fall from the sky. If the people in this building don't want to be turned into meat paste, do as I say. Chunks of iron falling from the sky. Jessica suddenly looked up at the Los Angeles night sky. In the distant clouds, a thunderous roar could be faintly heard, accompanied by firelight. "Crap, it's a clash of the titans." Jessica realized the severity of the situation instantly, her expression changing. "Does this count as a workplace injury or overtime?" "Count it as Tony Stark's debt." William pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses. "Go, if you're too slow, there won't be any overtime benefits." Hearing about benefits, Jessica charged toward the building's revolving glass doors like a cannonball. Bang! She didn't use the door at all, finding the revolving door too slow and smashed directly through the adjacent tempered glass wall with her shoulder. Amidst the piercing alarm, she burst into the lobby. Enemy attack, everyone get the hell out. Where's the fire alarm?" Jessica's piercing, raspy voice exploded in the lobby. William stood on the plaza, watching the interior of the building instantly descend into chaos, and nodded with satisfaction. He thrust his hands into his coat pockets, his gaze locked onto the 2 fireballs drawing closer in the night sky. "The one on the left has more mass, the one on the right is more agile. It seems Obadiah has thoroughly studied the Mark I blueprints," William assessed silently. He was a doctor, and what he hated most was this kind of large-scale, indiscriminate destruction. It would create hundreds of patients with comminuted fractures, internal organ ruptures and burns, and he couldn't possibly treat them all alone. Rumble. The sound of the air being torn apart from the sky was already deafening. Inside Stark Tower, with Jessica's violent assistance, Pepper finally triggered the entire building's emergency evacuation alarm. Hundreds of employees poured out of various safety exits like startled ants, screaming as they ran toward distant blocks. Dr. William Pepper in her high heels ran out of the building under Jessica's escort. Her face was pale as she watched the two entangled firelights in the sky. Is that Tony? Wasn't he at home? He treated the doctor's orders like a joke and insisted on coming out to stretch his legs. William didn't look back. Miss Potts, take your people and keep retreating. Get behind the cordon. This place is about to become a demolition site. No sooner had he spoken, bang. A massive dark shadow fell from the sky, slamming heavily onto the asphalt road in front of Stark Tower. The ground instantly collapsed into a crater over 10 meters in diameter, with spiderweb-like cracks spreading frantically in all directions. Several cars parked on the roadside were flipped by the massive shockwave and smashed into the nearby greenbelt. Amidst the swirling dust, Ironmonger's terrifying frame slowly stood upright. The red electronic eyes scanned the surroundings, finally locking onto William and the others in front of Stark Tower. Pepper, you damned rat, you're here too. Obadiah's voice was full of malice. Perfect, I'll deal with you all together. Ironmonger raised the miniature missile launcher on its left arm. Boss, watch out, Jessica roared, reaching for a nearby stone bollard to throw. Just then, another roar came from the sky. Stay away from my little assistant. Mark Roman 3, trailing a ragged exhaust flame, dived down from the sky like a sharp sword, its feet slamming hard into Ironmonger's back. Boom. The massive kinetic energy caused Ironmonger to stumble, its huge body falling forward uncontrollably. But Obadiah reacted quickly. He spun around and grabbed Tony's leg with a massive mechanical hand, swinging Mark Roman 3 like a tattered bag and slamming it into a support pillar of Stark Tower. Bang! The support pillar snapped, and large sections of the glass curtain wall poured down like a waterfall. Tony was dazed by the impact, and the first-generation arc reactor in his chest flickered twice, its light becoming extremely dim. Tony, Pepper screamed, wanting to rush over but was held back firmly by Jessica. Go to your death, your thin arms and legs aren't enough to fill that iron hunk's teeth. Jessica held Pepper tight. Ironmonger walked with heavy steps toward the Mark Roman 3 embedded in the wall. It's over, Tony. 30 years of Stark Industries ends today with me. Obadiah raised the Gatling gun on his right arm, the barrels beginning to spin frantically. Click, a very faint click, yet exceptionally clear amidst the mechanical roar. William had somehow walked to the side of Ironmonger. He wasn't wearing any high-tech armor, nor was he holding any heavy weapons. He was just wearing that deep black windbreaker, holding a high-carbon titanium alloy scalpel as thin as a cicada's wing. Mr. Stark, it seems you owe me another life. William pushed up the gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose, and there was no warmth in the dark pupils behind the lenses. The drive shaft of this piece of junk is exposed, and the design of the hydraulic lines is simply a disaster. William's voice wasn't loud, but it clearly reached the ears of Tony and Obadiah. Where did this bug come from? Get lost. Obadiah didn't even look at William. Casually swinging his massive mechanical arm to swat this reckless Asian man like a fly, William didn't dodge. He took a deep breath. The bioelectric signals inside his body instantly flowed in reverse, breaking through the safety threshold of the cerebral cortex. 8 inner gates. First gate, gate of opening, open.